In 2013, the European Consumer Center ranked Ryanair the continent's most complained about airline. That same year, Ryanair carried over 81 million passengers, more than any other airline in Europe, more than British Airways, more than Lufthansa. People hated flying Ryanair, and they kept doing it anyway. That contradiction is not a flaw in the business model. It is the business model. To understand how an airline built an empire on discomfort, you have to go back to 1985. That year, a small Irish family called the Ryans launched a regional carrier between Waterford and London Gatwick. One aircraft, 25 seats, a staff of 25 people. The idea was simple. Break the duopoly between Aer Lingus and British Airways on the Dublin-London road. Those two carriers charged the equivalent of over £200 for a return ticket. Ryanair charged $94. Within a year, passenger numbers on that corridor tripled. But cheap fares without discipline are just losses. By 1991, Ryanair had burned through roughly 20 million Irish pounds and was technically insolvent. The Ryan family made one decision that saved the company. They handed control to a 30-year-old accountant named Michael O'Leary. O'Leary had studied what Southwest Airlines was doing in America, and he understood one thing nobody in European aviation wanted to admit. Passengers do not buy comfort. They buy the lowest number they see on a screen. O'Leary rebuilt Ryanair from the ground up around one obsession: cost, not lower cost. The lowest possible cost. Every single line item attacked. The first weapon was secondary airports. While every other carrier fought for gates at Heathrow and Charles de Gaulle, Ryanair went to Stansted, Charleroi, Girona. These airports were desperate for traffic. Some paid Ryanair to land there, offering handling fee waivers and passenger subsidies worth millions of euros per year. Landing at Frankfurt Hahn instead of Frankfurt Main saved Ryanair roughly 10 euros per passenger in airport charges alone. Multiply that across tens of millions of passengers and you have a structural cost advantage that rivals cannot replicate. The second weapon was fees. Ryanair did not simply charge low fares. It charged a very low base fare and then charged for almost everything else. Checked bags, priority boarding, seat selection, printing your boarding pass at the airport. At one point, there was even a proposal to charge for using the toilet. The toilet charge never happened, but it illustrated the philosophy with perfect clarity. Every service that legacy carriers bundled into the ticket price, Ryanair unbundled and sold back separately. By 2018, ancillary revenue, meaning fees and add-ons beyond the base fare, accounted for roughly 28% of Ryanair's total revenue. That is not a side business. That is the margin. The third weapon was the fleet. Ryanair operates exclusively Boeing 737s, not two variants. Not a mix of narrow and wide body, one aircraft type. That means every pilot is certified on the same aircraft. Every mechanic knows the same engine. Every spare part fits every plane. The training costs collapse. The inventory costs collapse. The scheduling complexity collapses. In 2013, Ryanair negotiated a deal with Boeing for up to 175 additional 737-800 aircraft at a reported discount of roughly 50% off list price. When you are buying planes by the hundreds, Boeing negotiates differently. The fourth weapon was the turnaround. Ryanair built its schedule around one brutal discipline: getting the aircraft back in the air fast. The target was 25 minutes on the ground between landing and takeoff, gate to gate, cleaned, boarded, pushed back, gone. A plane on the ground generates zero revenue. Every extra minute parked at a gate is a cost with no return. O'Leary removed reclining seats to speed cleaning. He removed window blinds. He removed seat back pockets. Every removed feature was not a cost-cutting measure. It was a speed measure, because speed is money. The fifth weapon was selling every surface. The cabin itself became a revenue channel. Seatback trays carry advertising. Overhead bins carry advertising. The exterior of the aircraft carried advertising deals with companies like Jaguar and Hertz. In the early 2000s, Ryanair even explored selling scratch cards mid-flight. The aircraft was not a vehicle. It was a captive retail environment at 35,000 feet. By the mid-2000s, the model was producing results that the aviation industry Found almost impossible to believe. In 2006, Ryanair posted an operating margin of roughly 20%. British Airways that same year posted around 8%. Ryanair was not just cheaper to fly, it was more profitable per seat than almost every full-service carrier in the world. The rivals noticed. Some of them tried to copy pieces of the model. None of them could replicate it completely, because the model is not a collection of tactics, it is a culture. Every layer reinforces every other layer. But Ryanair's story is not one of uninterrupted triumph. The model created a pressure point that nearly cracked the whole operation. In September 2017, Ryanair announced it was canceling roughly 2,100 flights affecting over 400,000 passengers. The reason was almost embarrassingly avoidable. The airline had mismanaged its pilot leave roster. It had run out of available pilots at the exact wrong moment. The cost was significant. In its half-year results, Ryanair reported the cancellations had hit profits by roughly 25 million euros. Then the pilots, emboldened by the chaos, began to organize. For the first time in Ryanair's history, pilots in Ireland voted to strike in December 2017. O'Leary had spent over 2 decades keeping unions out of Ryanair. He once described union recognition as something that would never happen on his watch. In December 2017, Ryanair recognized unions for the first time. O'Leary called it one of the most significant decisions in the company's history. The lean machine had a human cost that had finally come due. Then came 2020. COVID-19 grounded the global aviation industry in a matter of weeks. Ryanair carried just over 27 million passengers in the financial year ended March 2021. 2 years earlier, it had carried over 149 million. The airline posted a net loss of over 1 billion euros for that financial year. Its first loss of that magnitude in its history. But Ryanair had something its rivals lacked. A balance sheet built for war? O'Leary had maintained cash reserves and avoided the debt loads that sank Norwegian Air and Flybe during the same period. Norwegian Air entered bankruptcy protection in late 2020. Flybe collapsed entirely in March 2020. Ryanair kept flying. When travel reopened in 2022, Ryanair was positioned to absorb routes and slots that collapsed carriers had vacated. In the financial year ending March 2023, Ryanair carried over 168 million passengers, a new record. Higher than any year before COVID. It posted a net profit of over 1.4 billion euros, the most profitable year in its history. The company that Europe loved to hate had outlasted almost every disruption thrown at it. Now let's recap exactly why Ryanair keeps winning and why it is so hard to stop. First, secondary airports. Ryanair built its entire route network around airports that desperately needed its traffic and would pay for the privilege of hosting it. Second, fees replace fares. The advertised price is a door, every product beyond it is a margin. Third, fleet uniformity. One aircraft type means pilots, mechanics, spare parts and simulators all serve the same machine. The savings are structural, not optional. Fourth, turnarounds under 25 minutes. The asset only generates revenue when it is airborne. Every minute on the ground is a minute of cost with no return. Fifth, ancillary income from every surface. The plane is not a vehicle. It is a retail environment. The seat, the tray, the overhead bin, all of it earns. No single layer is decisive. All 5 together create a cost structure that full-service rivals cannot match without dismantling what they are. Which brings us back to that 2013 ranking. The most complained about airline in Europe, and also the most flown, simultaneously. In the same year, the conventional wisdom in business is that customer experience drives loyalty, and loyalty drives profit. Ryanair ran a 40-year experiment proving the opposite is sometimes true. Price can override experience entirely. When the price is low enough, the customer's stated preferences become irrelevant. What they say they want and what they actually choose are 2 different things. O'Leary understood something that most executives are too polite to say out loud. Comfort is not a need, it is a preference, and preferences have a price. When you lower the price far enough, the preference disappears. That is what Ryanair figured out, and what its rivals still haven't fully accepted. The misery was never a mistake. It was the product, and 168 million people a year keep buying it.